Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's the CD guy, Johnny Z here. Thank you so much for tuning back into the channel, and today I'm going to be counting down 5 rock and metal bands caught using backing tracks. The use of backing tracks or pre-recorded tapes has been described as an epidemic, and I absolutely agree, I understand bands, they get older, and they can't give you the show that they could 30 years ago, but in my opinion, it's still not an excuse to resort to using backing tracks to help get them through the concert. I think a lot of fan bases would be appreciative of these bands, being honest and saying, look, the show is not going to be what it used to be, but we're still giving you an honest show, and we hope you're still going to come out and see us. And I think a lot of fans of these bands would still come out and support them. But to me, I just can't get behind any band for any reason using a backing track or a pre-recorded tape. The bands should be honest, should be performing honest shows, and I know a lot of people will defend these bands to the ends of the earth. Everybody has an opinion on this, but my opinion goes as this should not happen. Now, these bands are in no particular order, but I'm going to kick things off here with Falling in Reverse, one of the most maligned rock and metal bands in the community today, and I absolutely agree with a lot of the criticism they get. Not a fan of theirs, and even less of a fan of Ronnie Radke as a human being, but they made headlines earlier this year when they canceled their performance at the 95 Will Rock Fest because they couldn't find their laptops. They went missing, and they couldn't do the show without them, so frontman and awful person Ronnie Radke issued a statement saying, and I quote, "Because we just got off tour, we don't need to rehearse that much, and we walk into rehearsals and our laptops are missing that we run all of our show on and stuff. And as a band in 2022, you need your laptops. It's like driving a car without an engine. It's really unfortunate. Supposedly they are lost. Blame it on our crew, I guess. I don't know what happened. That's never happened before." So a couple things here, really. So first of all, you need a laptop to get you through a live set, a shortened set at a festival date in 2022. You can't just go up there and play your instruments and sing. You can't just perform and do your job. You need to fall back on, pre-recorded whatever on a laptop. That's really disappointing, Number two, the fact that they canceled their set over this is just egregious, in my opinion. You can't go up there and do, an acoustic set or an a cappella show, something, just to satisfy the paying customers that may have paid to see Falling in Reverse, which, if you're paying to see Falling in Reverse in 2022, I'm sorry in advance, but for the people that did, they ended up getting nothing out of the band, which is really disappointing in its own right, Nobody was sick, nobody was hurt, so whatever happened to the show must go on attitude. I guess that's totally lost on this band, which is very disappointing. But, another thing I don't like here about this statement is the fact that they blamed it on the crew. It's not the crew's fault that you need to use pre-recorded tapes to get yourself through a shortened set at a festival. That's really disappointing as well. You can't just go up there and do your job, so you have to fall back on laptops, and then when the laptops are missing or don't work, you just go ahead and blame your crew. That's not right, as far as I'm concerned, so very disappointed here in the band. It's a bad look for the group. Of course, like I said, I'm not a fan of Falling in Reverse, don't like Ronnie Radke, and absolutely can't defend this incident here. Just a bad look for the band all around. It's common knowledge at this point that Motley Crue have been using backing tracks for their background vocals for many years at this point, but you also don't have to be a rocket scientist to realize that, just comparing the vocal performances from Vince Neil from some of the solo dates that he did a couple years ago to his performances on the stadium tour, that there's more funny business going on than what meets the eye. And Nikki Sixx has commented on this in the past, saying, and I quote, "We've used technology since '87. Sequencers, subtones, background vocal tracks, plus background singers, and us. We also tape stuff we can't tour with, like cello parts and ballads, etc. We love it and don't hide it. It's a great tool to fill out the sound." So, in some respects, I guess it's good that they're not hiding it, but the thing that they're being honest about is dishonesty. They're being honest about having a dishonest show, You don't need cello parts and, all these other background instruments, to perform a great rock and roll show. Just give us the best show that you're capable of and the best show that you can do, which, if you've seen some of the live recordings of Vince Neil from a couple of years ago, maybe that's easier said than done. But in the past, Mick Mars has stated that he isn't a fan of playing along with a backing track or pre-recorded music. But, he may have eased his stance over time as well, based on some more recent comments from 2014. But nonetheless, pretty disappointed here in Motley Crue, who have definitely become somewhat poster childs for, using backing tracks during live performances. I wouldn't say that they're the first band that comes to mind, who I'll get to in a little bit, but definitely one of the bands who have employed that since 1987, like Nikki Sixx has said, and seems to be getting more and more obvious as time goes by, especially on the past stadium tour. Following that up here, we have Fozzy, the band led by pro wrestler Chris Jericho. And look, I love Chris Jericho. He's my favorite pro wrestler of all time. Love everything he's done in pro wrestling, right? I think he's killing it in AEW as the Ring of Honor champion, right? Great stuff there. But as a musician, not a fan of Fozzy, which, may beg the question, but why do you own a Fozzy CD? Well, I bought it back when it came out because it had Judas on it, right? The title track, which is actually a great song, but, I don't think I've listened to this album once in, like, the 5-6 years I've had it, It's just not a great album. Fozzy are not a great band. They're even worse as a live band as well. Judas is a great song, but I get to hear it every week on AEW now, so I really have no interest in this record at all. Haven't listened to it in years, like I said, so Fozzy are just a terrible live band. If you ever heard any live clips, Chris Jericho sounds like a dying animal when he sings, and again, I love Chris Jericho, but not a big fan of his musicianship, certainly not a fan of Fozzy or their live set, and, they've admitted, Chris Jericho, I should say in particular, has admitted to using backing tracks for some songs, saying, and I quote, "We use backing tracks for some songs, and everybody does," end quote, Chris Jericho can say what he wants, and there are a lot of people who subscribe to this argument here that, well, everybody does it. Well, let me just tell you, I don't think any bands like Iron Maiden or AC/DC, Motorhead, Ronnie James Dio would ever resort to using backing tracks. So, Chris Jericho is certainly not Bruce Dickinson or Ronnie James Dio, but he may be the Dio of pro wrestling. He's not the Dio of music. He's the Chris Jericho of music, and apparently the Chris Jericho of music resorts to using backing tracks and sings along to the tape. So that's very unadmirable, but Fozzy are not a great live band to begin with, so I definitely regret buying this album. Not a Fozzy fan, but love Chris Jericho in pro wrestling, not a fan of his work with Fozzy, and certainly not a fan of some of his ideologies when it comes to using backing tracks in concert. Next up, this one hurts me because they're one of my favorite bands of all time, like legitimately in my top 5 favorite bands of all time, so don't take this the wrong way. I'm a diehard fan, just disappointed by what I've seen. This next pick here is W.A.S.P, and I talked a little bit more about this on the video that I did talking about the 40th anniversary tour, debating whether or not it's been awesome or disappointing up to this point, and one thing that I wanted to talk about during that video was the alleged use of backing tracks by Blackie Lawless here throughout the show, and, I've seen it live, I've seen the clips online as well. There's some kind of funny business going on. Something looks very fishy. Tracks like On Your Knees, The Torture Never Stops, The Flame as well, Animal, sounded just like the album. And I don't mean that in a good way. I mean that in a suspicious kind of a way. Blackie's vocals sound identical to the record. And if you look at live clips and you zoom in on Blackie's face when he's singing, it's very clear that he's miming to some tracks. That's just what I've noticed. And that's not to say that he's not singing anything, right? There are tracks during the live set like Chainsaw Charlie, Blind in Texas, I Want to Be Somebody, and Wild Child that sound totally legit, but there are also a few songs on the live set that are completely, being mimed to, or Blackie just pulling a Milli Vanilli straight up here, not singing at all, which is very disappointing. And, if you want to go back even further, back to 1997, Blackie used a backing track to get himself through the chorus of Kill Your Pretty Face, because that song just has some insane high notes in the chorus that are going to be very hard to, replicate in a live setting outside of the studio every single night. So, well, that's understandable. I don't understand why the band continue to use backing tracks to this day, because, for the songs that Blackie actually sings, he sounds pretty good. So I don't get it. Unless he's saving his voice for certain high points in the show, I just can't defend it. And, I just wish bands would be honest, especially for Blackie, who's been honest pretty much in every other facet to the fan base throughout the years. I just can't believe he's one of the people who's pulling this kind of stuff in 2022, and there'll be people who will defend Blackie to the ends of the earth. And look, I love Blackie Lawless. I think he's a fantastic musician, a great lyricist, an underrated singer, but I just can't get behind this, and it's painfully obvious on some tracks. So this pick may be more speculation-based than the other entries here on this countdown, but for me, I'm just not a fan of what the band are doing in 2022 on the 40th anniversary tour, resorting to using pre-recorded tracks or tapes to get them to the show. Well, like I said, I was going to get to the poster child here for using backing tracks in rock and metal, the band that everybody seems to know are doing it. That's Kiss. It doesn't pain me to talk about Kiss doing this like it pains me to talk about W.A.S.P doing this, because I have no remorse for Kiss at this point. They've been doing this for so long, and it's just getting painfully obvious. It's not hard to dunk on Kiss, and as a matter of fact, it's kind of fun to do it, but when they're so obviously using backing tracks, it's just easy, and, it makes them, the easy target here, the poster child for what's going on. But, Paul Stanley's voice has deteriorated so much up to this point that it's painfully obvious what's going on here in the Kiss live set. He's been caught so many times using backing tracks, lip-syncing, being caught away from the mic when he's supposed to be singing, when you can hear his vocals being piped in. There are so many videos online, which you guys know where to find them, but it's very disappointing. And for Gene Simmons, somebody who's been very outspoken about, being against bands using backing tracks, his own band does it on a regular basis. It's safe to assume that Paul Stanley is lip-syncing or miming to most of the Kiss concert at this point, because if you hear his voice without the use of technology, it's rough, man. If you heard any of the recordings from the Kiss cruise, and him actually trying to sing, it's brutal. they're a band that really needs to be self-aware at this point and just hang things up, but they won't. They're on the retirement tour, but that tour's been going on for years now. It's a never-ending tour, and I think as long as you slap the word retirement on a tour, you're going to make more money, which subscribes to the Kiss ideology perfectly, and it's safe to assume at this point they're never going to retire. Especially since, if you think about it, if they extend that tour all the way out to 2024, then they can embark on a 50th anniversary tour for their debut record, which, there's money in that as well. So for Kiss, I really don't think the retirement tour has any end in sight, and they're continuing on a nightly basis to deceive their fan base. And I saw a video of somebody breaking down all the times Paul Stanley uses backing tracks, and apparently, and this is not confirmed, but just alleged by somebody, that the pre-recorded tracks that are being piped into the arena even include some mistakes to throw people off into thinking it's actually Paul singing live, which it's not. And, anybody who's, seen Kiss live can probably attest to this at this point, but there are a lot of people who will defend the band. Listen, I'm not expecting Kiss from 1976 anymore. I think it'd be unfair for anybody to expect Kiss to put on a show equivalent to what they did back in the 70s in their prime, but, a 2022 Kiss show should just be an honest show, and if they can't do it, then it's time to hang things up completely, because they're destroying their legacy at this point, tarnishing it, and it's so, unfair of Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley to constantly dunk on Ace Frehley and Peter Criss, former members of the band. Well, at least Ace Frehley is out there on a nightly basis giving you a real show, Ace Frehley is great live. Maybe he's not what he used to be. He's washed up, probably in the same boat as some of the current members of Kiss at this point. Probably should retire, but at least what he's doing is honest. It's not dishonest like what Paul Stanley has been doing for a long, long time now, and it seems to be getting worse. He's getting worse at hiding it. I've done this rant before on Kiss. I'm very disappointed in their output over the last few years as he's getting caught more and more often. It's so obvious what's going on, and it's beyond disappointing because they're tarnishing their legacy beyond repair at this point, and this cannot go on. I feel like Eddie Trunk at this point because he says the same thing, echoes the same sentiment, but I absolutely agree with him. This stuff cannot go on. It's disgraceful, and Kiss have been right at the forefront of it. Paul Stanley really is the poster child for what's been going on, and I think the stunts that he's been pulling on this tour, and probably even going back further than that, has just been downright disgraceful. Well, now that I've done my Eddie Trunk impression for the day, that wraps up this list here, counting down 5 rock and metal bands caught using backing tracks, which, again, not a fan of it. This should not happen. Take anything away from this video, it's that I am firmly against it, and when I did the W.A.S.P video for the 40th anniversary tour, and I reviewed the tour so far, got a lot of people defending, what Blackie Lawless was doing with the backing vocals, allegedly, and I understand that some people will defend these bands to the ends of the earth, right? I get that. W.A.S.P, Kiss, 2 of my favorite bands of all time, but it's so disappointing to see what's going on here, and, it's not hard to notice it either. So I wanted to point it out here. Obviously I've done a lot of research into this, and the more research I do, the more disappointed I get. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel down below, turn on the bell for notifications to be notified of a new upload, and let me know down in the comments below, what are your thoughts on band using backing tracks in 2022? Is it acceptable, or should it be outlawed like I've been saying? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Let me know all that good stuff down in the comments, and until next time, it's the CD guy, Johnny Z, signing off. Take care, everybody.